Minneapolis was a seminal moment in President Trump's immigration crackdown. It led Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino to retire after his agents killed 2 civilians, and it galvanized organized opposition around the country to ICE's aggressive tactics detaining immigrants. Even before that, a network of immigrant advocates has been growing in the Adirondacks. We take a look inside on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Morja Wealth Management, serving the North Country for 3 generations. MorjaWM.com. Securities offered through Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Hightower is an SEC-registered investment advisor. And Kinney Drugs, now accepting S3, Nations Benefits, and OTC Network Wellness Benefit Cards for eligible over-the-counter health items. Details at KinneyDrugs.com.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Tuesday, March 24th. First up, a Canadian tugboat inadvertently severed underwater power lines in the St. Lawrence River last May, resulting in $300,000 of damage. WWNY-TV reports a Coast Guard investigation found the Wilf Seymour tugboat out of Hamilton, Ontario, was in Canadian waters when its anchor unexpectedly deployed. The crew found damage to the anchor flukes. A short time after, the Marine Safety Unit Thousand Islands received a report that 4 National Grid power lines running between Clayton and Dark Island had been severed. National Grid replaced more than 17,000 feet of cable and restored power 2 days after the incident. Nonprofits in underserved communities across New York State are hoping for another round of funding in the state budget. Samuel King with the New York Public News Network reports they're lobbying in Albany for a $90 million allocation.
Last year, the New York Black Legislative Task Force requested $50 million for nonprofits and received $30 million. This year, they're asking for $90 million. Assemblymember Chantel Jackson of the Bronx is chairwoman of the task force. She says members went on a statewide listening tour to help determine where the funding should go.
We've hit all the places to listen to the people tell us what is absolutely necessary and needed in their communities.
Phil Nelson is with the STACK Project, a financial literacy nonprofit in Broome County.
The challenges we face remain the same: mental and physical health, substance abuse, housing instability, economic inequities, and of course poverty, to name a few.
Legislative leaders and the governor are negotiating a budget deal ahead of the March 31st deadline. In Albany, I'm Samuel King for the New York Public News Network.
Since the Trump administration began its immigration crackdown, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, has arrested thousands of people across New York. Many of the highest profile raids have happened in the state's cities, but ICE agents have also carried out targeted searches in the North Country, on farms, at local businesses, even in private homes. A growing network of local activists is forming to protect immigrants from those federal actions. David Escobar has our story.
Keela Grimmett first felt the impact of immigration enforcement last winter when she picked up her daughter from her Lake Placid school.
Teachers were crying, kids were holding cupcakes, and I quickly realized something was going on.
A Venezuelan family at the school had their temporary protected status revoked, meaning they faced deportation. A federal judge reinstated their legal status a few days later. But for Grimmett, it was a first-hand look at how federal immigration policies are reshaping life in the Adirondacks.
That really keyed me in on there are people within our local community who are being impacted by this.
In the years since that incident, Grimmett has helped organize Lake Placid Immigrant Allies. The group is part of a growing network of North Country residents responding to immigration enforcement. She's become a go-to contact for immigration resources in town. She and her team track ICE activity, run Know Your Rights trainings, and have led protests to help people understand the local impact of immigration enforcement.
A lot of the people within our community, we talked about this the other night, don't know that even any kind of arrests are taking place up here. Well, it's not here. It's just in Chicago and LA and New York. It's not here. But it is.
Immigration was a cornerstone of President Donald Trump's campaign. His administration has pushed aggressive deportation tactics in his second term. That approach remains popular with supporters, but it's also drawn growing criticism, even in rural regions where immigrant populations are relatively small. In the North Country, ICE has carried out several high-profile raids at places that employ immigrants, on a dairy farm in Sackett's Harbor and at a lumber mill in Tupper Lake. Megan Maloney de Zaldivar with the New York Immigration Coalition says those targeted raids pose a problem for the region's economy.
The reality is that, we need people to work, especially in the North Country. We suffer from population decline. And many of these immigrants are folks who are willing to take these incredibly difficult jobs.
Maloney de Zaldivar says worker shortages and limitations to federal visa programs have led the region's dairy, construction, and quarry industries to turn to undocumented workers. The Trump administration has said its enforcement efforts are focused on criminals, or what officials often describe as the worst of the worst. But Maloney de Zaldivar says the reality on the ground looks different.
Under this administration, we're not only talking about folks who don't have any status at all, we're also talking about people who are in some sort of process, who are fighting their cases, who have been given work authorization, and still are being targeted.
That reality is part of what's fueling a growing network of immigration advocates in the North Country. Richard Leach founded the Adirondack Regional Immigration Collaborative. He says he originally created the group before ICE's escalated deportation efforts to welcome new immigrants to the area.
I ended up with the idea that we needed to develop a different kind of organization, and that's this Adirondack Regional Immigration Collaborative, because there are so many communities in the North Country that are drying up and need our migrants desperately.
Leach's organization is based in Lake George. He says many rural villages around the town have been shrinking for decades, with fewer families staying long-term. He sees immigration as a way to reverse that trend.
I began to think about our communities throughout the Adirondack region specifically that are aging and depopulating, and school systems kind of disintegrating because they don't have enough pupils.
So Leach's group started connecting newcomers with basic services, things like food, housing, legal assistance, and classes for new English learners. But as ICE activity has increased, he says the work has shifted toward more urgent needs, tracking federal agents, compiling reports on where and how immigrants are being detained, and working alongside other organizations like Keela Grimmett's Lake Placid Immigrant Allies. Grimmett leads a rapid response team that fields alerts from residents who spot ICE agents making arrests.
If ICE is in the community, one of the things we're really trying to do is figure out how to create a bubble around that ICE officer or officers to keep the community safe.
Similar tactics were used most famously in Minneapolis. Activists took to the streets to monitor ICE agents during last January's large-scale immigration crackdown. Federal agents killed 2 protesters during confrontations, and public backlash reframed the debate over ICE's aggressive tactics nationwide. In the North Country, organizer Martha Swan says protests against ICE have remained peaceful, but she says moments like that are a reminder of what's at stake.
History is being made right now in very dramatic and very, very consequential ways. Maybe you're not someone who's going to stand on the corner and protesting, but find what it is you can do.
That call to action has fueled a growing number of advocacy groups in places like Saranac Lake, Keene Valley, and Westport. Many of these groups have also become more structured, with smaller teams focusing on specific needs like lobbying and public outreach. But Grimmett says all this work can take a toll. High-profile deportations and clashes between federal agents and protesters have weighed heavily on activists. Even in those moments, she says she feels a responsibility to keep showing up for her community and for her kids.
I often think, I'm taking a lot of time away from them to do this work, and I want them to be able to look back and say, during that time period that was really hard in our country, our mom did everything she could to show up for people.
Grimmett says it's hard, exhausting work, but she plans to keep showing up for her neighbors. David Escobar, North Country Public Radio.
David Escobar is a Report for America Corps member. He reports on diversity issues in the Adirondacks through a partnership between North Country Public Radio and Adirondack Explorer. Music today by Eddie Lawrence of Saranac Lake and Ben Cato of Jay. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.